All right, so here is my talk that I'm talking. It's
directional at all. I apologize.
Almost there.
okay. All right, here we go. All right, so my name's Phil, but there's like 9 million Phils at this convention apparently. So to distinguish myself, I am Phil, aka Phil268, aka the Mix-Up Phil, aka Pancakes for Breakfast, aka Thrills for Phils, aka the GOU, I'll brute force answers if I want answers, aka, no, it stops there. So I made a demake of Uru, and I've got to make a clarification real quick after talking to some people here. I am not related to the Mist Apple II demake at all. I think that was made by someone named Vince Weaver. I don't know him. This is not related to that. So if you were hoping for like a Uru demake for the Commodore 64 or like the Macintosh Pippin, curb your enthusiasm for that. This is just to talk about kind of the thoughts and perspectives that went into making this demake, kind of the obstacles and challenges that I had, and kind of how I overcame them. There will be spoilers for Uru and my demake. And some of you, I think most of you already know what a demake is, but some of you may be thinking, hey, Phil, 268, what is a demake? Yeah, all right, there's a question right there. And to that I'll say, be patient. All your questions will be answered in time. And that time is right now. So what's a demake? I mean, you know what a remake is. It's when they take like an old movie or whatever and they make it new with new actors, new CGI. A demake is the opposite of that. You take something new and you make it in the style of something old, right? In terms of video games, you make it, here we have a very recent example. Bloodborne is a relatively modern game for modern systems, the PS4. Some fans basically made a demake and remade Bloodborne, at least a section of Bloodborne, in the style of a PS1 game with the graphics, the gameplay, the UI that is really evocative of that time period. And then another example, of course, is the Mist Apple II demake, which again, not related to, and also that is way more technically impressive than anything I'm going to talk about today. All right, so why did I even bother doing that? What possessed me to tackle this kind of challenge? Basically, it was just an intersection of a bunch of coincidences. I don't have a lot of time on my hands, and there's this program called Bitsy. It's a game editor. You can make very simple games. It's very basic, so basically, there's not too much to worry about. You can very quickly kind of put out a very simple type of game, and that's a good use of my time. So I'd made a few games in that kind of engine before already, so I kind of already knew how it worked. And then afterwards, I was playing Uru online with some friends, so that was on my mind. And so I started just idly thinking about like what would Uru look like in the most recent game engine that I had worked on. And then I thought, why not, just as a creative challenge, just for fun, try to remake at least a part of Uru in Bitsy. And some of you might be asking, Mr. Pancakes for Breakfast, what is Bitsy? What are you talking about? And
Mr. Pancakes for Breakfast, what is Bitsy? What are you talking about?
well, to that I say all your questions will be answered in time. And the time is right now. Bitsy is a minimalist game editor. There's almost no coding. They have like if-then statements, and that's about it. There's no physics, no lighting. There's like no real animation. There's no modeling. There's no texturing. You only have 3 colors per screen. You can see several examples right there on the screen. The only thing that can change on the screen is the position of the player avatar. There's no sound or music at the time that I made my demake. The creator of Bitsy, Adam Ladeau, he has added kind of like 4-bit music and sounds, little bleeps and bloops to the game, and maybe I'll go back and add that to my demake, but at the time there was none of that, so it's just quiet. Basically all you can do as a player is walk around and read text and just see things. Most people use it for like prototyping, like if they're making a game in another engine and they just want to quickly prototype some level, outline, level layout ideas. They use it for that, or just making short games, digital essays, vignettes, digital poems. That's kind of what people use it for. It's not really meant to be making a full-fledged puzzle game. All right, so let's talk more about those limitations and how it affected the kind of choices I had to make. So player avatar is the only thing that changes. You can't, for example, have an object roll across the screen or fall off a ledge. You can't have the player push an object like a box or, a picture unrelated. You can't have big machines moving around, that sort of thing. And there's no save option in Bitsy. So it's just like, if you're going to play, you're going to play it. And if you start over, you start over. So basically, I knew it had, if I was going to do this, it has to be short, immediately accessible, right? Immediately grab people. The puzzles need to be pretty simple. They can't be too complicated because I'm going into this assuming, I know I'm going to put this up on itch.io. But there's a bunch of people who don't know what Uru is. They don't care. They just saw the puzzle game tag, on the game, and they want to play a puzzle game. So I'm assuming that if they hit an obstacle and they can't continue, they're just quitting the game and they're never coming back, right? I'm assuming that most people coming into this game, they're either going to complete it in one session or they're just going to give up on it and that's all. So I need things to be kind of streamlined. Okay, so I don't know if this is going to, oh, yeah, it's working. So there's a little clip of the game in action. As you see, it's all very basic stuff. I'm running around, I'm going to hit that switch down there, it goes ka-chunk. And then I walk away and I walk ka-chunk again. And then I walk and I go on to another screen, and that's it. That's what the game looks like. Yeah. Okay, there we go. So I did not remake all of Uru. I just demade 3 ages because that was manageable. So I'm just going to talk about those. I'm not going to talk about any of the other considerations that I did. So first of all, Kaddish Talesa, it's pretty obvious. Big trees are cool. Everyone loves big tree levels in video games. You can see some other video games with big tree levels. Those are all awesome video games because they have big tree levels in them. Also, in a previous Bitsy game I'd already made some pixel art assets for giant trees. So I already had that. I could just reuse it. Boom, that's a shoo-in. That's a go. All right, Teledon. So kind of similar concept, giant mushroom world. Everyone loves giant mushroom worlds. On top of that, I'm not a visual artist. I don't know what I'm doing in terms of drawing, color, theory, any of that. But in terms of pixel art, I can draw a mushroom. It's just like a round thing with a stick. It's almost like a lollipop. I can handle that as someone who's not an artist. But again, I cannot emphasize enough, everyone loves a fantastical mushroom world, right? You got your glowing mushrooms in a cave, you got giant mushrooms you bounce on, little mushroom villages with gnomes living inside, and they pour you some tea and you have a little tea party. Everyone loves a giant mushroom world, a fantastical mushroom world. Need I say more? Yes, I do need to say one more thing, because there's another reason I picked Teledon. So I knew that some of these puzzles would have to be kind of simplistic, maybe even gimmicky. They might not be what most people think of in terms of a puzzle game, so I wanted at least one world that would be just the classic Myst-style puzzle. This classic Myst-Riven style puzzle where you see a big lever, right? You see a bunch of big machines, and then you see a lever, and you pull the lever, and the lever goes ka-chunk, and you're like, what did that do? And you go running around the level like, oh, it moved that thing. How does that help me solve the puzzle, right? I wanted at least one that felt like that, and Teledon is kind of a shoo-in for that because it kind of already has a lot of those features. So that was a go. Okay. And then a none. I don't know what I was thinking, guys. That's probably the most complex conceptually of all the Uru ages. But that's probably also why I felt kind of drawn to it. I tried to think of other ages to demake for Uru because I decided at just 3. But my brain just kept pulling me back towards a none, being like, hey, try to figure out how to make a none work, right? So I said, okay. And I thought the first part of a none, it's basically just a maze, right? It's a little bit more complicated because you're teleporting, so your motion through the maze is not a linear, continuous movement. It's kind of broken up into different sections. And then on top of that, you're not just navigating the maze spatially, you're navigating the maze temporally through time. So, but basically, it's just a maze, and I can handle that in the Bitsy engine. I didn't do that, though. I wound up making it much harder for myself, and I honestly do not remember how. Just at one point, all of a sudden, I was looking at the work I was doing. I'm like, oh, man, what happened to that simple maze idea? I'm now making some complex thing that I don't fully understand. But hey, it is what it is. Okay, so translating Uru general considerations. The first thing I had to acknowledge, I can't do a one-to-one mapping, right? The limitations of the Bitsy engine just don't allow it. And then on top of that, it would be kind of pointless to duplicate the puzzles one for one, because why would somebody play my version of Uru that has the same puzzles when they can just play the original Uru with the good graphics that also has those puzzles, right? So, it was pretty obvious that I had to kind of recreate the spirit of the ages or the puzzles rather than the concrete, discrete, elements of it. And some of you may be asking, hey, Phil, hey, Mr. Thrills for Phils, why is there a picture of a isomorphic mapping of a matrix up there? I don't know, guys. I don't know. So let's look at a few of those specific, like recreating the spirit of something. So in Rooted Hold Age, that's my version of Kaddish Talesa. Also, Rooted Hold is a little homage. It's a little Easter eggs for those of you that know. Not related to the Myst universe. But it's got a couple puzzles where you just basically you're walking down a specific path. So I made a couple puzzles where you walk down a specific path, right? It's a very different style, different perspective, but kind of the spirit is still there. With Fungal Mill Age, that's my version of Teledon. You've got a puzzle where you lower a water level to access an underground passage, and you've basically got the same thing with my version. Also in Fungal Mill Age, you've got that cart, that bucket that kind of carries you up to a higher area. That kind of motion and movement and animation isn't possible in Bitsy, so I kind of faked it with a claw that kind of just jumps down, grabs you, and pulls you up to a higher area. Again, trying to, whether I was successful or not, who knows, but I was trying to recreate the spirit of that. Chronolateral Age. In addition to None being kind of complicated, I gave my Demake a real tongue twister of a name. But anyway, so, None is 4 islands at different stages of time, living, dead, outer space, and statue. And that really does sound like the 4 stages of, human life that we all go through. And then in my version, again, 3 islands to make it more manageable. And different stages of time, but kind of a different interpretation of that. It starts, goes wild, inhabited, and then ruined. And that if you think about it, that is the 3 stages of at least one relationship we've all been in. Am I right? Color palette. Again, I'm not an artist. I don't understand color theory very well. I've tried to. I don't know. I don't get it. So one of the issues I had is Bitsy, you only have 3 colors per screen, and the 3 colors I kept picking, people kept saying looked bad. I would say, oh, this looks kind of cool, and they say, no, that's hurting my eyes. So when I was trying to figure out how to solve this, go through this, I remembered an old piece of advice that a pixel artist gave on, I think, Twitter way back when, and they were talking about if you're a pixel artist and you want a consistent kind of color palette, what you can do is you take a picture or a photo or a painting, and then you put it into Photoshop. There's some tool that Photoshop has where you can just keep pixelating it. You pixelate, 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 and it keeps averaging out the colors to create these pixels and these, and you just keep using that tool to pixelate it until you have the colors you want. You want 16-bit colors, you pixelate it until there's 16 colors on, the thing. Now, when I made this game, I couldn't remember what that advice was, and I don't know how to use Photoshop. So what I did is I would just take a screenshot from Uru, and I would zoom in at different spots and use the color selector in Microsoft Paint, and I would just select one of the pixels that looked okay, and I wound up doing this. So in this example, you can see the blue in my game comes from the blue of the lamps in Teledon. The green in my game comes from the green mushrooms. The yellow, it probably comes from either the cliffs or the big mushrooms. I don't remember exactly. But basically, every single screen in my my Demake, it contains colors that are from one of the pixels of one of those Uru screenshots. So that's another way that the kind of DNA of Uru kind of lives on in my kind of Demake. Okay, yeah, let's talk about design. So for the Rooted Hold Age, that's Kaddish Talesa. I originally thought, I'll just make some puzzles about walking down a certain path. And I thought, that's not very engaging for the player. That's not very fun. It's not very challenging. It's kind of gimmicky. And so I played around with some other ideas, including what if there's a weird tree maze, and you have to find a telescope, and you look through the telescope, and you see a bunch of symbols, and you look through another telescope, and you see a bunch of symbols, and that clues you into how you navigate this tree maze. What about using like weights to raise and lower, bridges or doors or ladders or what have you? And then, after playing around with those ideas, I was just like, those are too clunky. They wouldn't really work very well in the Bitsy engine, and I just wound up looping right back to my original idea. Let's just make some puzzles where you walk down a specific path. So sometimes your first idea is your best. Sometimes you take a big circular route to figure that out. Fungal Mill Age. So that's the one that was Teledon. That's the one where I wanted just a classic Myst-style, Riven-style puzzle. So there's not much to talk about in the design there, but I will talk about one of the ways that I kind of overcame some challenges. So you could see in the previous shot, I was doodling stuff in my notebook, design ideas, and I was doing that with Fungal Mill Age. And as I kind of just was walking through how the player would solve the puzzle, I kept, making changes or iterations, which meant I had to redraw the whole level over and over and over again. I got sick of that, and I remembered this technique of paper prototyping. So I just cut out a bunch of squares. I drew each screen on a square, and then I took a playing piece from a board game, and I would walk the playing piece through the different tiles as though it was the player walking through the different screens. And if I needed to change anything, I just swap the tiles around, remove a tile, draw a new tile, and add it in. And it really streamlined the process of making sure the level worked. It didn't lock players into a dead end trap. It didn't allow players to find a shortcut through the puzzle. So I could have created a prototype in Bitsy just to test stuff out, but then I still have to worry about software and UI and a little bit of coding. By just doing paper prototyping, it allows me to just focus on the design, just the thing that I care about. So if you do any of this kind of work and you don't know about paper prototyping, it's pretty useful. It's fast, cheap, easy. I mean, you can get it set up in about 10 minutes, no problem. One more thing, I'm not going to go into it in too much detail because I don't want to waste too much time. One of the things that helped me design this particular Ages puzzle is by starting the player at the end state of the puzzle and then working backwards step by step. And that also helped clarify puzzles, errors, that kind of stuff. Chrono Atoll. It looks like I have a lot to talk about it, but I don't. Basically, I wanted this to be kind of the most complex of the puzzles. I wanted it to be like hard mode. So I made sure there was multiple stages. I think this is the only one where I deliberately had red herrings in it. And I also added multiple clues for sake of redundancy. So the same clue kind of occurs in different ways in different parts of the level to try to make sure, try to capture all the different player types and, what people are paying attention to. You might not pay attention to one thing, maybe you'll notice the other thing. One other thing, I never liked how in the original None, how the time shifting worked. It's triggered by a player linking out, which seemed to me kind of passive. It seemed uneventful. So for my version, I was just like, I'll just change that. And the way that the time periods change is because the player actually has to hit a switch to do it, which I just like a lot more. That's it. That's just a little anecdote at the end. Player feedback. In all fairness, I only got feedback from 3 people. But those are the 3 people that gave me feedback, so those are the ones I listened to. And they both they had 2 problems, and both of the problems kind of are the same thing from a different direction. So in in the forest world, whatever that's called, there's a puzzle where you're walking down the path and you fall through the floor into a kind of underground area. And people were getting through that obstacle very easily, but then they were telling me, I don't know, what was that? I don't get it. I solved it, I guess, but I didn't understand why. So that's a bad sign. And then for the time islands, right, the Uru Demake, players didn't even understand what they were supposed to be doing. They didn't understand how anything was functioning, right? So kind of the same problem, but from a different direction. In one case, in both cases, people don't understand what's going on. One case they can solve it, one case they can't, but it's still the same problem. And in fact, the players who told me about my Uru Demake, they even would say, I've played Uru, I've played the original None, I still don't understand what your version is doing, which is a real bad sign. And also, I watched a couple playthroughs of these players, and I saw they were focusing too much on the red herrings, which is yet another problem. So, fixing the game based on player feedback. So, right there you can see the top 2, that's the old versions. The bottom 2 are the newer fixed versions. And on the left, that's the surface area with the path you walk along. The right-hand side is the kind of underground area with the tree roots that you fall into at certain points. So what are some changes that I made to kind of fix this puzzle? One, you can see right here in the lower left-hand corner, there's like this yellow box. That is a sign that players can read. That gives players context to what's going on. It kind of explains a little bit more about what's supposed to be happening and what things mean. On top of that, I changed the mechanics. There was like a certain reason that the player would fall through certain parts of the maze, and people weren't understanding that, so I kind of changed how that worked. I changed what triggers that. And then the other thing, you can sort of see in the two top versions, that's those old versions, you can see one ladder on the left. Then if you look at the bottom version, there's two ladders, one on the left, one on the right. And that's because I created two obstacles for the puzzle so that it would have to be completed in two stages. And this is a classic game design trick to basically try to make sure the player understands what's going on. You know, if you have one obstacle, maybe the player gets through it on accident. You have two obstacles that have to be solved the same way, less likely they're going to solve it both times by accident. And it's more likely that, you know, even if they solve the first part on accident, the second part, they're going to think a little bit more about it and maybe, you know, in that second context, kind of get what's going on. So that's kind of how I try to make more sense to players and reduce the chances they would solve it accidentally. Okay, so time islands. I decided the mechanics were fine, probably because I didn't want to deal with any more coding and design on that one. I decided that, you know, I would reduce the confusion from red herrings. I didn't remove them completely, but I kind of made it more obvious that they're not important. And then I needed to communicate meaning better. So if you look at those top two screenshots, and you look at all the different images and symbols that are up there, and then you look at the bottom screen, we've got left 2, left 5, right 5. What does left and right mean in context of those above two shots? If you guys are like the players who gave me feedback, you probably don't know. So here's the change I made. Now if you look at that top screenshot, do you have some idea of what left and right might refer to? I suspect that some of you do. Maybe some of you still don't. The problem is I shouldn't have really tackled the puzzle in this way. Bitsy's images, each square, basically there's a grid, and you put little pixel images, sprites on each square. That's 8 by 8 pixels. So if I want a kind of switch with a symbol on it, like you see in the upper screenshot, that symbol has to be 6 by 6 pixels. Which does not give me a lot of room to really convey meaning in terms of the symbol, but I was hoping that juxtaposing the two symbols against each other like that would kind of clear up what left and right mean. Okay, so some people might be thinking, why do that? It sounds like you're just making the puzzle easier for the players. What's the point? Where's the challenge? Okay, so first of all, again, I was assuming that most players would just play this in one session, and either they beat it or they don't. They just don't come back to it. So I really want to streamline the process of them playing through it. But secondly, it's not about hard or easy or difficult, at least not for me. There's many schools of game design and many schools of puzzle design, many ways of thinking about things. For me, I kind of adhere to kind of the principle that in terms of puzzle design, it's not about making it hard or obfuscating things or confusing or confounding the player. It's about guiding them towards that moment of revelation, right? That aha moment that puzzle designers talk about, right? So if people are telling me, I don't understand what this means, or I solved this puzzle, but I don't understand why, well, they didn't get that aha moment. They didn't get that satisfaction of putting together all the pieces themselves, and that means I did a bad job guiding them towards that. I did a bad job communicating to them what's relevant, what's irrelevant, how do things relate to each other. So it wasn't really about making the puzzles easier for me. It was about trying to do a better job of guiding the players towards their own revelation. Also, it's really trivial to make things hard. It's not challenging or interesting to make things hard for players. Those of you who are, remember the 1990s adventure games with their moon logic puzzles that force you to call the 1-900 number to get the hints, you know what I'm talking about, right? This slide was going to be an example of how it's trivially easy to just stump the audience, but it was going to require audience participation. We're running, I think, a little bit behind on time, so I'm just going to skip that. I will talk about this, something I added to my Demake that I'm really happy that I did, but it's not something that was in Uru, and it's not really something Myst-like at all, and that's these classic video game secrets, like, fake wall. It's a wall, but you can just walk through it, and there's a little secret behind it. So it's something more in line with something like, Mario or Doom. And so I was kind of like, when I came up with the idea to add this, I was like, should I? It's not really true to, Uru. It's not really true to kind of a Myst-like experience, but I've been kind of like reading essays about game design and puzzle design and listening to like talks, like GDC talks. And so I was thinking about things in a very analytical way. And I realized that secrets, video game secrets, are isomorphic to video game puzzle solving. In the sense that isomorphic means of the same shape. In mathematics, isomorphic structures are where you can map one structure onto another and back consistently because they have common features. And so, secrets, the experience of finding a video game secret can be mapped onto the experience of solving a puzzle, consistent because they have very similar experiences. Let me get into it. So you notice something that's strange or seems significant or seems incongruous with the environment around it. You investigate, you explore, you come up with a theory for what it might mean. You test it out, doesn't work. You test out a different theory. Boom, you solved it. You get that aha moment, right? Maybe in a smaller way with a video game secret than a puzzle, but it is a very similar experience. And here I'm going to use an example from the original Quake that has just stuck in my memory since whenever I first played it. It's kind of hard to see because it's all brown and gray, but you're playing Quake, you're killing weird cyborgs, and then you see this alcove above you. And you can't see it in the screenshot, but it's got a bunch of goodies in it. It's got super health, it's got quad damage, it's got ammo. You want to get up there. But you can't jump up there, and you can't grenade hop up there either. So you're like, how do I get up there? So you look around, right? And you see in this hallway, there's a ramp, and at the top of the ramp, there's a lamp, and you can't see it because it's not a GIF or a GIF, whichever you prefer. But that lamp is flickering, right? And you're like, none of the other lamps are flickering. That seems important. That's strange. So maybe you shoot the lamp. That doesn't do anything. You walk to you shoot the lamp, not the ramp. And then you walk up the ramp and you jump and try to hit the lamp. That doesn't work. And then after experimenting some more, you realize there's a little bit of video game logic here. And that is, if you run up the ramp, it'll actually give you a bunch of momentum in the z-axis. So at the top of the ramp, when you jump, you will have enough momentum to hit the lamp. You hit the lamp, a secret door opens up, and you get the secret. Aha! Right? So that process is a very similar process to solving a puzzle in Myst, or any puzzle game, right? And so I decided, once I kind of realized that, I'm like, okay, I'm adding it. And I'm really glad I did because it really fleshed out the game. I had some puzzles I wasn't sure if they were going to be really satisfying or fulfilling to the players. But by adding these secrets, I really kind of gave extra gameplay that's very similar to puzzle solving for the player to engage in. And I'm really happy I did. I think it really kind of enlivens the game. And it was a very little investment of time and thought for me as a developer or the player, right? As a developer, all I have to do is create a wall that's not really a wall and then a room behind it, and boom, I've done it, right? And then the player, they just have to pay attention. They don't have to think logically. They don't have to mentally remember a bunch of symbols. They can just be observant of the environment. So it's a limited investment of time and thought from both the player and the developer, and but it gets kind of big results. So how much time do we have left? If I timed this right, we have about 15 minutes left, maybe? All right. I'll talk about one more thing very quick, and then we can go to Q&A if we want. So as you can see here, I'm running up to a switch and hitting it, and that's making these crushers go back and forth, back and forth. And if you recall, I said Bitsy can't do that, can't make machines move. That's not possible. This is a trick to get around it, but it is a kind of an expensive trick, and that's this. Those are two separate screens. When you hit that switch, you're not moving the machines. You are teleporting between two nearly identical screens. And I didn't think about this at the time, but once I finished it and I was polishing it, fixing glitches and stuff, I suddenly realized, oh, that's the same trick from Myst, the original Myst, right? They had, the Myst was made as a hypercard stack, and you're not actually moving around or opening doors. When you open a door, you click a door and you jump. There might be like a screen wipe or a screen effect, but you jump to a separate card completely. You're not that in which the door is open. And so unintentionally, the tricks I was using in the, my Demake were unintentionally an homage to the original Myst, which I thought was cool. There's other things I can talk about, but for sake of time, thank you for listening. And if anyone has questions, feel free to ask. And if not, we can either end it here if we need to for time, or I can talk a little bit more. Okay, let's do the Q&A. Anyone have questions? Nope. All right. You got one right there.
Other than this kind of thing, what other kind of games have you worked on, or what are the kinds of games that you like to develop?
Not. I haven't really worked on much. Like when I was younger, I would do a lot of like modding for like if a game came with like map editors or mods, I would play around with those. I don't think any of them are left online anymore. Back in the day, I once made a Flash game way back when. That was kind of an experimental humor game. Mainly if I could make games now, they would mostly be like, I'd probably be making like exploration puzzle games. I just don't have that much time to learn a whole new thing like Construct or Game Maker or Unity or Unreal. I just don't have the time to get into it. So I kind of just rely on very simple stuff when I can, like Bitsy, to just make something that's within my time frame. Any other questions?
Hello, I'm here.
Swap out mics.
It's like a lightsaber. How much time did you put into making these?
For this, I think it was about like 2 months just sketching out ideas and prototyping just in a notepad. And that was partially also it probably took that long because I was also procrastinating. But then once I actually started putting stuff into the game, into the engine, it was about 4 months, just whenever I could in my spare time. I have a full-time job, so when I'm not working and I'm not too tired from work and chores and stuff, I would just kind of work on that. And so in total, about 4 months.
Hi. Hi. I was just wondering if you were thinking about using this engine to make possibly other games using the same engine, or if you were planning on making other demakes of future Myst games.
No, I don't know if everyone heard that because that mic's kind of quiet, but the question was, am I planning to do any more games in the Bitsy engine, or am I planning on making any other demakes of Cyan games in any other engine? And the short answer is no. I made a total so far 3 games in Bitsy. I originally only intended to do 1, just for fun, and I ended up making 3. I don't want to go back to it because it's just way too limiting of an engine. I don't have any plans to make anything in any other engine. Right now I've got a couple other creative things. I'm working on a sci-fi novel and then also a board game that I'm working on. After I'm done with those, maybe I'll go back to kind of digital games and maybe try to do something in like, Game Maker constructs, maybe something 2D. But yeah. Any other questions? Then I'll do one last thing. So I had a cast of characters in my game, and that's, I think, if not all of their names. And if you want a little take-home puzzle for you, I used a single methodology for generating those names. All of those names were created the same logic. And the puzzle is, how did I do that? I will give you one clue. It has nothing to do with Uru, everything to do with Myst. So yeah. And if there's no other question, one last call for questions. All right, I think that's it. Thank you.